The conference room on the 47th floor of the Kessler Braun building smelled like old money and fresh arrogance. Mahogany panels lined the walls, catching the afternoon light that poured through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Vanessa Cole stood at the head of the table, her dark hands pressed flat against the polished wood, and watched the couple across from her exchange a look that said everything their mouths hadn't yet dared to speak. Richard Whitmore was adjusting his cufflinks. His wife, Patricia, was examining her manicure. Neither had bothered to stand when Vanessa entered the room. Neither had offered a handshake. "I'm sorry," Richard said, not sounding sorry at all. "There must be some confusion. We were told we'd be meeting with the CEO of Meridian Dynamics." Vanessa didn't blink. "You are." The silence that followed was the kind that fills a room like smoke. Patricia's lips parted, then closed. Richard's jaw tightened. Somewhere in the building, an elevator chimed. "I see," Richard said finally, though his tone suggested he didn't see at all. He leaned back in his leather chair, crossing his arms. "Well, this is certainly unexpected." Vanessa had been in rooms like this before. She'd learned to read the micro-expressions, the subtle shifts in posture, the way certain people looked at her and saw something other than what stood in front of them. She'd built a $9 billion company from a single patent filed in her mother's kitchen, and still, somehow, there were people who walked into her boardroom and expected to find someone else behind the desk. What happened next would cost the Whitmores everything. But to understand how a single word spoken in arrogance could collapse a $900 million deal and reshape the future of two families, you have to go back 6 weeks to a charity gala on Lakeshore Drive, where Vanessa Cole first heard the name Whitmore and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. If you're the kind of person who appreciates stories about the moments that change everything, go ahead and hit subscribe. Now, let me tell you how this all began. The Children's Hope Foundation Gala was the kind of event where the champagne cost more per bottle than most families spent on groceries in a month. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. String quartets played softly in corners. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns worth small fortunes circulated through the ballroom, air-kissing and making promises no one intended to keep. Vanessa arrived alone, which was how she preferred it. Her gown was emerald green, simple in cut, but exquisite in fabric, and she wore her mother's pearl earrings, the only piece of jewelry that had survived their years in the projects on the South Side. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had long ago stopped needing external validation, but hadn't lost the hunger that drove her to keep proving herself anyway. At 43, Vanessa Cole was one of the most powerful black women in American business. Meridian Dynamics, her aerospace and defense technology company, held contracts with 3 branches of the military and had recently expanded into civilian applications. Her net worth fluctuated somewhere between $8 and $10 billion, depending on market conditions. Forbes had featured her twice. The Wall Street Journal had called her the most important CEO you've never heard of, which Vanessa considered a compliment. She preferred to let her work speak for itself. But wealth hadn't insulated her from the world she'd grown up in. She still called her mother every Sunday morning. She still sent money to her old neighborhood community center. And she still remembered, with perfect clarity, the feeling of being looked through, talked over, and dismissed before she'd even opened her mouth. That evening at the gala, she was nursing a glass of sparkling water near the silent auction tables when she overheard a conversation that made her pause. "The Whitmore Group is hemorrhaging money," a man was saying. He was silver-haired, distinguished, the type who probably played golf with senators. Richard's desperate. Word is they're shopping their satellite division to anyone who'll bite. "Satellite division?" his companion replied, a younger woman with sharp eyes and a sharper jawline. "That's their crown jewel. Marcus built that from nothing. Marcus is dead. Heart attack 2 years ago. Richard's been running things into the ground ever since. Patricia's the one pulling the strings now, and she couldn't run a lemonade stand, much less a tech company." Vanessa filed the information away. She knew of the Whitmore Group, of course. Everyone in aerospace did. Marcus Whitmore had been a pioneer, a brilliant engineer who'd built a modest family business into a serious player in satellite communications. His death had made headlines. What happened after hadn't. She was about to move on when a hand touched her elbow. "Miss Cole." She turned. A young man in a server's uniform was standing beside her, holding a small envelope on a silver tray. "This was left for you at the front desk." Vanessa took the envelope. Inside was a single card, handwritten in elegant script. "Miss Cole, I believe we should meet. My family satellite division may be exactly what Meridian Dynamics needs for your civilian expansion. I've taken the liberty of requesting a formal introduction through your office. Richard Whitmore." She read the card twice. Then she slipped it into her clutch and went to find another glass of sparkling water. 3 weeks later, the first meeting took place. It was held at Meridian's headquarters in a glass tower in the Loop, in a conference room designed specifically to put visitors at ease. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, a view of the lake that went on forever. Vanessa was running late. A call with the Department of Defense had gone long. So her COO, Daniel Park, greeted the Whitmores and showed them in. Daniel was Korean-American, 52, built like a former linebacker because he had been one. He'd worked with Vanessa for 15 years and knew her mind better than anyone except possibly her mother. When Vanessa arrived, she found Richard Whitmore standing by the window, hands clasped behind his back, surveying the view as though he owned it. Patricia was seated, her posture perfect, her expression arranged into something that might have passed for warmth if you didn't look too closely. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore," Vanessa said, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming." Richard turned. His handshake was brief, perfunctory, the kind given to assistants and wait staff. Patricia didn't rise. "We were hoping to meet with your board," Richard said, "or at least your CEO." Daniel's expression didn't change, but Vanessa caught the slight tension in his shoulders. "I am the CEO," she said. "Yes," Richard replied, his smile thinning. "So we've been told." The meeting that followed was stiff, formal, and unproductive. Richard did most of the talking, presenting slides that showcased the Whitmore Group's satellite division as though it were still the industry leader Marcus had built. The numbers told a different story: declining market share, outdated technology, a workforce that had shrunk by 30% in 2 years. But Richard spoke with the breezy confidence of a man who had never been told no. Patricia interjected occasionally, always to agree with her husband or to make pointed observations about Meridian's own position. "You've grown quite rapidly," she said at one point. Her tone suggesting this was not necessarily a compliment. Some might say unsustainably. "Some might," Vanessa agreed, "but our balance sheet speaks for itself." Daniel presented Meridian's preliminary offer, a partnership structure that would allow the Whitmore Group to retain partial ownership, while Meridian provided the capital and expertise needed to modernize the satellite division. It was generous, more generous than the Whitmores deserved, given the state of their company. Richard barely glanced at the terms. "We'll need to consult with our advisors," he said. "This is, of course, a significant decision." "Of course," Vanessa said. As the Whitmores gathered their things to leave, Patricia paused beside Vanessa's chair. "That's a lovely dress," she said. "Very colorful." Vanessa smiled. "Thank you. I'll tell my designer you approve." The door closed behind them. Daniel waited a full 10 seconds before speaking. "They're going to be a problem." "They already are," Vanessa said. "But we need that satellite division. The technology Marcus built is still sound. It just needs someone who knows what to do with it." "And you think you can work with them?" Vanessa looked out at the lake, where the late afternoon sun was turning the water to gold. "I think I can work with anyone," she said. "The question is whether they can work with me." Over the following weeks, negotiations continued. Lawyers exchanged documents. Financial analysts pored over spreadsheets. Conference calls stretched into late evenings. Vanessa made a point of being present for every major discussion, though she noticed that Richard consistently addressed his remarks to Daniel instead. The Whitmore Group's situation was worse than the initial numbers had suggested. Their satellite technology was a generation behind current standards. Key engineers had left for competitors. Their government contracts were up for renewal with no guarantee of extension. Without a significant infusion of capital and expertise, the division would be worthless within 5 years. But the underlying patents were solid. The manufacturing infrastructure was in place, and the potential applications for civilian markets, communications, navigation, environmental monitoring were exactly what Vanessa had been looking for. The deal on the table had grown to $900 million, a full acquisition rather than the partnership originally proposed. Meridian would absorb the satellite division, retain most of the workforce, and provide the Whitmores with the substantial payout plus ongoing consulting roles. It was, by any objective measure, a lifeline thrown to a drowning company. Richard and Patricia seemed to view it as an insult. "This feels very much like a takeover," Patricia said during one particularly tense call. "It's an acquisition," Daniel replied, "which is what you approached us about." "We approached you about a partnership, equal standing." Vanessa leaned forward. "Mrs. Whitmore, with respect, equal standing requires equal contribution. Your division's current valuation doesn't support 50-50 arrangement. We've offered terms that reflect both the potential of the technology and the reality of its present condition." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "We'll discuss internally," Richard said finally, "and get back to you." They did get back 3 days later, with a counteroffer that would have given them 60% equity and full operational control, while Meridian provided all the capital. Daniel called it delusional. Vanessa called it expected. She made one more offer. Final terms: $900 million for complete acquisition, with guaranteed employment for existing staff and a 5-year consulting contract for Richard and Patricia at generous rates. Take it or leave it. They agreed to a meeting to discuss. One final face-to-face to work out details. That meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon at the Kessler Braun building, neutral ground, selected by the Whitmore's legal team. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes early, as she always did. She reviewed her notes in the elevator. She thought about her mother, who was recovering from a hip replacement and who had told her that morning, "Don't let those people make you small." She walked into the conference room, ready to close the deal. Richard and Patricia were already there, seated side by side, their posture suggesting they'd spent the morning rehearsing their positions. An associate from their legal team sat in the corner, taking notes. The air smelled like coffee and expensive cologne. Vanessa set her briefcase on the table and extended her hand. Richard looked at it. Then he looked at her. "I'm sorry," he said. "There must be some confusion. We were told we'd be meeting with the CEO of Meridian Dynamics." And that's where the story began. But it doesn't end there. Vanessa held Richard's gaze without flinching. She was aware of her own heartbeat, steady and slow, the way it always got when she was about to make a decision that would cost someone something. "I am the CEO," she said. "I see," Richard replied. "This is certainly unexpected." Patricia was examining her manicure again, but her eyes were sharp, watching. "We were under the impression," Patricia said carefully, "that Mr. Park handled the operational leadership." "Daniel is my COO. He handles operations. I handle strategy, and I handle deals." Richard made a small sound in his throat. Not quite a laugh, not quite a cough. Something dismissive that he probably thought was subtle. "Well," he said, "I suppose we'll have to adjust our expectations." The meeting proceeded. Terms were reviewed. Vanessa walked them through the final offer one more time, highlighting the benefits, addressing their stated concerns, making clear that this was the last and best deal they would receive. She was thorough. She was patient. She was professional. And she was aware, every second, of the way Richard kept glancing at his wife, the way Patricia kept fidgeting with her rings, the way neither of them would look directly at her for more than a moment. 40 minutes in, they called for a bathroom break. Vanessa stayed in the conference room, reviewing her tablet, while the Whitmores stepped into the hallway. She didn't intend to eavesdrop. The conference room had excellent soundproofing, but the door hadn't latched properly, and voices carry in marble hallways. "This is ridiculous," Patricia was saying. We came here to negotiate with serious people. I know, Richard replied, but we need this deal. Do we? Do we really? We could find another buyer. There's no other buyer. Not at this price. Not with these terms. We've been over this. A pause. Vanessa could picture them standing in the hallway, Patricia's arms crossed, Richard's hand on her elbow, both of them wearing expressions of constrained fury. I just don't understand, Patricia said, how someone like that gets to be in charge of a company like this. Affirmative action, Richard said. Diversity quotas. You know how it is now. They have to put these people in visible positions. It's insulting. We're supposed to take orders from what? From some. She lowered her voice, but not enough. From some monkey who got lucky. The word hung in the air like poison. Vanessa set down her tablet. Her hands were steady. Her face was calm. Inside, something very old and very familiar had woken up. The part of her that had learned, as a girl on the South Side, that some people would never see her as fully human, no matter what she accomplished, no matter how hard she worked, no matter how much she earned. She had built a $9 billion company. She had created jobs for thousands of people. She had contributed more to American innovation in the past decade than the Whitmore Group had contributed in its entire existence. And still, to some people, she was just a monkey who got lucky. The door opened. Richard and Patricia returned to their seats, their faces composed, professional, betraying nothing. Shall we continue? Richard said. Vanessa looked at him, then at Patricia, then at the documents spread across the table. $900 million worth of lifeline, waiting to be signed. She reached out and gathered the papers into a neat stack. Actually, she said, I don't think we shall. Richard's smile faltered. I'm sorry, the deal is off. I don't understand. We were just about to. The deal is off, Mr. Whitmore. Meridian Dynamics is withdrawing its offer, effective immediately. Patricia laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. This is absurd. We've spent weeks negotiating. We've involved lawyers, accountants, advisors. And I've decided that the Whitmore Group's satellite division isn't a good fit for Meridian after all. Richard's face had gone red. He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. You can't do this. We had a deal. We were ready to sign. Vanessa stood too. She was taller than she looked sitting down, 5'10" in heels, and she met Richard's gaze without wavering. We didn't have a deal, Mr. Whitmore. We had a conversation, and that conversation has now ended. This is completely unprofessional. This is business, Vanessa said, and I've decided that I no longer wish to do business with you. She picked up her briefcase and walked to the door. At the threshold, she paused. For the record, she said, not turning around, I heard what you said in the hallway. Both of you. The silence that followed was absolute. Good luck with your company, Vanessa said. You're going to need it. She left them standing in that conference room with their mouths open and their futures collapsing around them, and she didn't look back. The fallout was immediate. Within 72 hours, word had spread through the industry that the Meridian Whitmore deal had collapsed. Speculation ran rampant. Some said it was a negotiating tactic. Others said Vanessa had found something troubling in the due diligence. A few suggested the Whitmores had demanded too much. No one knew the real reason. Vanessa hadn't told anyone, not even Daniel. You sure about this? He asked her, late on the night of the collapsed meeting. They were in her office. The city lights spread out below them like a circuit board. $900 million is a lot to walk away from. I'm sure. Can I ask why? Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. She thought about telling him. Daniel had been with her through everything. The early years when they'd worked out of a converted warehouse, the first major contract, the near bankruptcy during the recession, the slow climb back to solvency and beyond. He'd heard worse things in their years together. He wouldn't be shocked. But some things were too heavy to share, even with people you trusted. Let's just say they weren't the right partners, she said finally, and leave it at that. Daniel nodded. He didn't push. That was one of the things she valued about him. What do you want to do now? We keep looking. The civilian expansion is still a priority. There are other satellite companies. Smaller maybe, but more promising. And the Whitmores? Vanessa looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Richard and Patricia were probably pouring expensive scotch and cursing her name. Let them. She had better things to do with her energy. The Whitmores, she said, are no longer our concern. But she was wrong about that. 2 weeks after the meeting, the Whitmore Group's stock dropped 18%. Investors had gotten wind of the failed acquisition and were jumping ship. Within a month, their government contracts, already tenuous, were reassigned to competitors. Richard called Daniel's office 17 times, leaving increasingly desperate messages. Vanessa instructed her team to ignore them all. She was focused on other things. The civilian expansion moved forward with a different partner, a smaller but more innovative satellite company based in Colorado. The deal was cleaner, the technology was better, and the people involved actually respected her. Vanessa flew out twice for site visits. She attended an industry conference in Singapore. She gave a keynote speech at a technology summit where she talked about innovation, resilience, and the importance of building companies that reflected the best of human potential. She did not mention the Whitmores. She did not think about them. Mostly, some nights, lying in bed in her penthouse apartment, she would replay that moment in the hallway. The dismissive tone, the casual cruelty, the word itself landing like a blow. She'd heard worse in her life. Growing up on the South Side, she'd learned early that there were people in the world who saw her skin color and decided everything else about her before she'd said a word. She'd been called names in school. She'd been followed in stores. She'd been pulled over driving her own car in her own neighborhood, asked to prove she wasn't stealing it. The names hurt. They always hurt. But she'd learned to survive them. What made the Whitmores different was the context. These weren't random strangers on the street. These were educated, wealthy, supposedly sophisticated people who had come to her, begging for a lifeline. And even then, even while asking for her help, they couldn't see past the color of her skin. That was the part that stayed with her. Not the insult itself, but the profound, bone-deep arrogance that allowed them to say it. The assumption that they were better than her, despite all evidence to the contrary. The belief that she had somehow stolen or stumbled into her position, rather than earning it through decades of work. She thought about her mother, Elaine, who had raised 4 children on a nurse's salary and never let any of them believe they were less than anyone else. She thought about her father, gone now 15 years, who had worked maintenance at a steel plant and come home every night with his hands scarred and his spirit intact. She thought about the teachers who had believed in her, the mentors who had opened doors, the colleagues who had seen her for who she was. And she thought about the Whitmores, who had seen nothing at all. 3 months passed. The Whitmore Group filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Richard released a statement blaming market conditions and strategic miscalculations. He did not mention the failed Meridian deal. He did not mention anything at all. Vanessa read about it in a business journal while eating breakfast. She set down her coffee and thought about calling her mother, just to hear a kind voice. Instead, she went to work. 6 months after the collapsed deal, Vanessa received an invitation she hadn't expected. It came through official channels, hand-delivered to her office, an invitation to speak at the National Business Leaders Summit in Washington, D.C. The theme was innovation and inclusion. Vanessa had been invited to give the closing address. She almost declined. Public speaking was part of the job, but she'd never sought the spotlight the way some CEOs did. She preferred to let Meridian's work speak for itself. But something about the timing felt right, and when she saw the list of other speakers, senators, cabinet members, Fortune 100 executives, she recognized an opportunity she couldn't pass up. She said yes. The summit was held in late October in a grand hotel ballroom decorated with American flags and corporate banners. 300 of the most powerful people in American business were gathered, eating overpriced chicken and pretending to listen to panels about synergy and disruption. Vanessa sat at the head table, watching and waiting. Her speech was last on the program, the closing address, scheduled for 8 p.m. She'd spent weeks working on it, writing and rewriting, trying to find the right words for what she wanted to say. At 7:45, she was escorted backstage to wait for her introduction. She stood in the wings, listening to the murmur of the crowd, feeling the familiar pre-speech tension that had never entirely gone away, no matter how many times she'd done this. And that's when she saw them. Richard and Patricia Whitmore were seated near the back of the ballroom, at a table far from the stage. They looked diminished somehow, thinner, grayer, their posture less confident than she remembered. Richard was nursing a drink. Patricia was staring at the tablecloth. For a moment, Vanessa considered walking away, giving her speech, collecting her applause, flying home, and never thinking about the Whitmores again. But there was something in the way they sat there, clearly uncomfortable, clearly aware that they no longer belonged among the powerful. That made her pause. She thought about what it would feel like to call them out from the stage, to tell 300 of the most influential people in America exactly what Richard and Patricia Whitmore had said about her in that hallway 6 months ago. She could destroy them. Completely. Permanently. She had the platform, the audience, and the moral high ground. And for one long, seductive moment, she wanted to. Then she thought about her mother, about the lessons Elaine Cole had taught her children, over and over, through all the years of struggle and sacrifice. Don't let them make you small, her mother always said, and don't let hate make you smaller. Vanessa took a breath. Then she walked out onto that stage and gave the speech of her life. She talked about her childhood on the South Side, about her father's hands, worn rough by decades of hard labor, about her mother's determination that every one of her children would have opportunities she never had, about the moments of doubt and despair that came with building something from nothing, and the people who had helped her through them. She talked about the obstacles she'd faced as a black woman in a white-dominated industry, the doors that had been closed, the assumptions that had been made, the words that had been spoken, sometimes to her face, more often behind her back. She didn't mention the Whitmores by name. She didn't need to. And then she talked about choice. Every one of us, she said, looking out at that sea of powerful faces, gets to decide what kind of leader we want to be. We can build walls, or we can build bridges. We can tear people down, or we can lift them up. We can let our worst impulses win, or we can choose, every day, to be better than our fears. She paused. The room was silent. I've been called a lot of things in my career. Some of those things were meant to diminish me, to make me feel small, to remind me that there are people in this world who will never see me as their equal, no matter what I achieve. She looked toward the back of the room, toward the table where the Whitmores sat, frozen, their faces pale. But here's what I've learned. The people who try to make us small are almost always struggling with their own smallness. Their cruelty comes from fear. Their hatred comes from weakness. And the best response, the only response that matters, is to keep building, keep growing, keep proving, through our actions, that we are exactly who we know ourselves to be. She smiled. It was not a cruel smile, not a triumphant smile, just a small, genuine expression of something that might have been peace. So to anyone who has ever tried to make me feel less than human, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I do. Because carrying that weight would only slow me down, and I have too much work left to do. The applause started slowly, from the front tables, and built until the entire room was on its feet. Vanessa stood at the podium, looking out at the standing ovation, and felt something shift inside her, some old wound finally beginning to heal. She caught Richard Whitmore's eye across the ballroom. He was standing, too, though he wasn't clapping. His face was a complicated map of emotions. Shame, recognition, something that might have been the beginning of understanding. She nodded at him. Just once. Then she walked off the stage and into whatever came next. The aftermath of the speech was overwhelming. Vanessa's inbox filled with messages from colleagues, strangers, other executives who had faced similar struggles and felt seen for the first time. A video of her address went viral, viewed millions of times, shared across every platform. Interview requests poured in. Book offers appeared. A filmmaker wanted to make a documentary. Vanessa turned down most of it. The speech had been its own reward. She didn't need to capitalize on it. But there was one message that caught her attention. It arrived 3 days after the summit, delivered by courier to her office in Chicago. A simple envelope, cream-colored, with her name written on the front in handwriting she recognized. Inside was a single card. Ms. Cole, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to respond. But I owed you this much. I'm sorry. What I said was inexcusable. There's no justification, no explanation that matters. I was wrong. I was cruel. I was everything I told myself I wasn't, and I have no one to blame but myself. I've spent the last 6 months watching everything I built collapse, and I've told myself it was bad luck, bad timing, bad decisions by everyone except me. But listening to your speech, I finally understood the truth. I didn't lose my company because the market turned against me. I lost it because I couldn't see what was right in front of me. Because I was so convinced of my own superiority that I pushed away the one person who could have helped me. You didn't owe me anything. You offered me a lifeline anyway. And I threw it away because I couldn't accept help from someone I refused to see as my equal. I don't know if you can forgive me. I'm not sure I would in your position. But I wanted you to know that your words reached me. That I'm trying to change. That I understand, finally, what I lost. And I'm not just talking about the money. Thank you for being the person you are. I hope to be half as strong someday. Richard Whitmore. Vanessa read the letter twice. Then she set it down on her desk and looked out at the city. She thought about forgiveness, what it meant, what it cost, whether it was even possible to forgive someone who had hurt you so casually, so completely. She thought about her mother's voice, calm and certain, telling her that hate was a burden only the hater had to carry. She thought about the Whitmores, alone in their diminished lives, facing the consequences of their choices. And she thought about herself, at 43, at the peak of her career, with everything she'd ever wanted and still, sometimes, feeling like that girl from the South Side who had to prove herself over and over again. She picked up the phone and called her mother. Hi, Mom. Baby, I was just thinking about you. I watched your speech again this morning. Your father would have been so proud. Thanks, Mom. I actually wanted to ask you something. Anything, sweetheart. Vanessa looked at the letter on her desk. How do you know when someone's sorry is real? There was a long pause. She could hear her mother breathing, considering. You don't, Elaine said finally. You can never know for certain what's in another person's heart. But here's what I've learned. The apology isn't for them. It's for you. You get to decide what you do with it. You get to decide whether carrying that hurt serves you anymore. The question isn't whether they've changed. The question is whether you're ready to put it down. And if I'm not, then you're not. And that's okay too. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give on a schedule. It comes when it comes. Or it doesn't. And either way, you keep living your life. Vanessa smiled. When did you get so wise? 67 years of practice, baby. 67 years. After they hung up, Vanessa sat for a long time, watching the sun set over Chicago. The office was quiet. The day was ending. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build something worth building. She picked up a pen and pulled a sheet of letterhead from her desk drawer. Mr. Whitmore, I received your letter. Thank you for writing it. I won't pretend that what you said didn't hurt me. It did. And I won't pretend that I'm over it completely. I'm not sure anyone ever gets over being reduced to something less than human by someone who should know better. But I believe in second chances. I believe people can change. And I believe that the measure of a person is not the worst thing they've ever done, but what they do next. If you're serious about change, real change, not just words, then let me suggest something. The Whitmore Foundation used to support engineering scholarships for underprivileged students. I looked it up. It was dissolved last year when the company went bankrupt. I'd like to help you restart it. Not as a business arrangement. Not for publicity. Just because it's the right thing to do. And because I believe that investing in young people who have been told they can't succeed is the best way to prove that they can. If you're interested, have your people call mine. We'll set something up. Vanessa Cole. She sealed the envelope and left it for her assistant to mail in the morning. Then she went home, ate dinner with the TV off, called her sister to catch up on family news, and went to bed early. She slept better than she had in months. The scholarship program launched 8 months later. It was called the Marcus Whitmore Memorial Fund, named after Richard's late brother, the engineer who had actually built the satellite division, the one whose brilliance had been squandered by people who didn't understand what they had. Richard and Patricia contributed what remained of their personal wealth. Vanessa matched it, then doubled it. Other donors came forward, drawn by the story of the fund's unusual origins. Within a year, they had enough to support 50 students annually, providing full tuition, living expenses, and mentorship opportunities at top engineering programs across the country. Vanessa served on the board. So did Richard. Their meetings were formal at first, stiff with the memory of what had passed between them. But over time, something shifted. Not friendship, exactly. Some wounds don't heal that way. But a kind of respect. A recognition that they were both trying to build something bigger than their own failures. The first class of Whitmore scholars graduated 4 years later. Vanessa attended the ceremony, sitting in the audience beside her mother, watching as young people from backgrounds like her own walked across the stage and claimed their futures. One of the graduates was a young woman named Maya Chun, the daughter of immigrants from Vietnam, raised in a neighborhood not much different from the one where Vanessa had grown up. Maya had been told her whole life that engineering wasn't for girls like her. She'd proven them wrong, graduating top of her class with a specialization in satellite communications. After the ceremony, Maya found Vanessa in the crowd. "Miss Cole, I just wanted to thank you for everything." Vanessa smiled and shook her hand. "Don't thank me. You did the work. But you gave me the chance." "That's all anyone can do," Vanessa said. "Give each other chances. What do you do with it? That's up to you." Maya nodded, her eyes bright with tears she was too proud to shed. "I won't waste it," she said. "I promise." Vanessa believed her. On the flight home from the graduation, Vanessa sat by the window and watched the clouds roll past below. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a cramped apartment on the South Side to the heights of American business, from being called a monkey in a conference room to funding scholarships for the next generation of engineers. She thought about Richard Whitmore, who had learned something valuable at the cost of everything he thought he had. About Patricia, who had quietly divorced Richard and moved to Europe, where she was apparently learning to paint. About all the people who had tried to diminish her and failed, and all the people who had lifted her up and succeeded. She thought about her mother, still calling every Sunday morning, still asking when Vanessa was going to slow down and find someone to share her life with. About her father, gone but never forgotten, whose hands had built the foundation on which she stood. And she thought about the words that had started it all. The ugly word, spoken in arrogance, intended to wound. It had wounded her. She wouldn't pretend otherwise. But it had also shown her something important, that the measure of her character wasn't what people called her. It was what she did next. She had built a scholarship program from the ashes of an insult. She had turned hatred into opportunity. She had proven again that the best revenge wasn't destruction, it was creation. The plane touched down in Chicago as the sun was setting, painting the skyline in shades of gold and rose. Vanessa gathered her things and headed for the exit, already thinking about tomorrow's meetings, next month's launches, next year's goals. There was always more work to do, always more to build, always more chances to give. And somewhere out there, in engineering labs and lecture halls and cramped apartments where young people were daring to dream, the future was being written by hands she had helped to steady. That was enough. That was more than enough. Vanessa Cole walked out of the airport and into the warm evening air, and she was smiling.